"Your Honor, she's not my real mom." The 10-year-old boy's voice cracked, but his words cut through the formal silence of the courtroom. Every person in the gallery froze. But it was the judge, a self-made billionaire presiding over a routine custody hearing, whose face went pale with a recognition he could not hide. The words hung in the air. 10-year-old Isaiah Pierce stood at the witness stand, pointing not at his foster mother, Ms. Evans, but directly at the judge himself. This was supposed to be a routine custody hearing. Now, it threatened to expose a secret buried for decades, a connection between a powerful billionaire judge and the woman fighting to keep the child. And as Isaiah continued, he would reveal a name that Judge Arrington prayed he'd never hear again. The courtroom was utterly still. The bailiff's hand froze near his radio. The court reporter's fingers hovered above the stenograph keys. All eyes were locked on Judge Marcus Arrington, a man who had negotiated billion-dollar mergers without flinching. Now, the color drained from his face. He gripped the edge of the bench, his knuckles white against the dark wood. Isaiah Pierce held his gaze, the boy's small finger still extended in accusation. The foster mother, Lena Evans, sat in the first row of the gallery, her hands clasped so tightly the tendons stood out. She shook her head slowly, a silent plea to the boy. Isaiah had been in the foster system for 3 years. His case file, a thick stack of paperwork on the clerk's desk, told a story of loss and bureaucratic motion. Parental rights terminated due to chronic neglect. 4 previous placements, 3 different schools. He had arrived at Lena Evans's modest 2-bedroom home in Crestwood 8 months ago. It was meant to be temporary, another way station. But for the first time in the caseworker's notes, the word stability appeared. Then the biological aunt, largely absent for years, petitioned the court for custody. This hearing was to decide Isaiah's permanent home. Judge Marcus Arrington wasn't supposed to be here. He was a federal appellate judge, a titan of the bench. He'd taken this single-family court assignment as a favor, a one-day fill-in for an ailing colleague. He owned a telecom empire worth an estimated $4.2 billion. His biography featured on the covers of business magazines, highlighting his rise from a housing project to the Ivy League to the federal judiciary. He was known for his impatience, his intellect, and a profound, unshakable control. Until this moment. Isaiah's court-appointed guardian ad litem, a weary but kind man named David Chen, leaned forward. "Isaiah," he said softly, "can you tell the judge what you mean?" The boy took a shuddering breath. He looked small, swallowed by the witness stand. "Ms. Evans is nice. She makes me pancakes on Saturdays. She helps me with my reading, but she's not my real mom." He turned his eyes back to the judge, and his voice, though quiet, carried, "You know my real mom. Her name was Anya." A sharp gasp came from the gallery. Lena Evans pressed a fist to her mouth. The name meant nothing to most in the room, but Judge Arrington closed his eyes for a long second. When he opened them, they held a history of pain he had spent a lifetime walling off. 25 years ago, long before the billions, before the judgeship, Marcus Arrington was a first-year law student struggling to pay rent. He shared a cramped apartment with his childhood friend, Michael Pierce. Michael's younger sister, Anya, was a constant presence. Vibrant, artistic, and battling demons their broken family couldn't fix. Marcus and Anya had a brief, intense, and secret relationship. It ended badly in tears and recriminations when Marcus chose his career path over the chaos she embodied. He heard, years later through the frayed grapevine of his old neighborhood, that Anya had a son, that she'd lost custody, that she had passed away. He had buried the guilt and the memory under layers of professional achievement. He never asked the boy's name. Now that boy was in his courtroom, Isaiah Pierce, Pierce asterisk. The surname, a common one, hadn't triggered the connection. The case summary just said maternal family non-viable. He'd glossed over it, seeing another tragic but routine file. But the face now, looking at Isaiah's determined brow, the specific curve of his jaw, Marcus saw Anya. He saw his old friend Michael. He saw a past he had legally and emotionally abandoned. "Your Honor," the aunt's attorney interjected, breaking the silence. "This is highly irregular testimony from a minor. It's emotional manipulation, likely coached. We move to strike it from the record." Judge Arrington held up a hand. His voice, when it came, was low and gravelly, stripped of its usual authority. "The witness will continue." It was not a judge's order. It was a man's request. Isaiah nodded, encouraged by the permission. "Ms. Evans found a box in the closet from my old life. She said I could look when I was ready. There was a picture of my mom when she was young. She was with a man." The boy's eyes never left Arrington. "She wrote on the back, it said me and Marcus, Coney Island. You look older now. Your hair is different, but it's you." Lena Evans stood up. "Your Honor, I can explain. I didn't know Isaiah showed me the picture last week. I recognized you from a newspaper article about a charity donation. I told him it might be important to tell the truth today. I never meant. I just thought the judge should know there might be a personal connection." Her explanation tumbled out, a mixture of earnestness and terror. She had broken an unwritten rule of the system. You never surprise the judge. The aunt's attorney was on his feet. "This is outrageous. This proves the foster parent is actively undermining this proceeding and poisoning the child against the biological family. We move for immediate disqualification and a mistrial." Chaos erupted. The court clerk reached for the procedural manual. David Chen argued for calm, for the child's need to be heard. Lena Evans looked like she might be sick. And Judge Marcus Arrington did something no one in the room had ever witnessed. He seemed to shrink into his robes. The imposing figure vanished, replaced by a man cornered by his own history. The conflict of interest was not just a technicality. It was a living, breathing boy in front of him. He had a duty to recuse himself immediately. But to do so would be a public admission of this hidden past, sparking headlines, ethics investigations, and throwing Isaiah's fate into an even more chaotic delay. He looked at Isaiah, really looked at him, not as a case number but as Anya's son, as a piece of a life he'd left for dead. The boy needed a ruling, a home, and the man who might hold the key to his entire history was the one person in the room now forbidden from helping him. He raised his gavel. The room fell silent, waiting for the recusal for the storm. But Arrington's voice, when it came, was a whisper of defiance against the legal machinery. "The court will take a 15-minute recess. The child will remain with his guardian ad litem. Foster parent Evans, you will wait in the hall with your counsel." "And counsel," he said, his gaze finally sharpening on the aunt's lawyer, "you will draft your motion for disqualification. We will reconvene. And then we will get to the truth of all asterisk of this." He brought the gavel down. The crack echoed like a starting pistol. But as he stood to leave the bench, his eyes met Isaiah's one more time. And in that look was a silent, staggering question. How do you judge a case when you're suddenly, painfully a part of it? In his chambers, Judge Marcus Arrington did not sit. He stood at the window, his back to the door, his reflection a ghost in the glass. The weight of the robe felt like a costume. The photograph, the one Isaiah described, existed. He knew because he had one just like it, buried in a storage unit he hadn't opened in 20 years. Anya laughing on the boardwalk, her hair whipped by the salt wind, him with an arm around her, trying to look older than his 22 years. He had loved her in the chaotic, desperate way of young men who see a broken bird and think they can fix it with sheer will. He had failed. And now her son was in the next room, and the legal machinery demanded he disqualify himself. But another, older instinct was roaring to life, a duty to the boy that went beyond the bench. His clerk, a sharp young woman named Priya, stood in the doorway. "Your Honor, the motion for disqualification is being drafted. The court reporter has the transcript of the minor's testimony ready for review. What are your instructions?" Arrington didn't turn. "Get me the case file for Isaiah Pierce, the entire history from the day he entered the system, and I want the contact information for his last known biological relative, Michael Pierce, his uncle. Judge, with all due respect, if you're considering recusal, engaging with the case file or the family could be seen as. I know what it could be seen as, Orrington interrupted, his voice quiet. Get me the file. While the judge waged a silent war with his past, the hallway outside the courtroom was a battlefield of the present. The aunt, a woman named Teresa with a hard, weary face, stood flanked by her attorney. You put him up to this, she hissed at Lena Evans. You're trying to steal my nephew with some fairy tale about a judge. Lena, her voice trembling but clear, held her ground. I told him to tell the truth. That's all. He showed me the picture. I recognized the judge from the news. I thought the court should have all the information. Information, Teresa's lawyer scoffed. You manufactured a conflict to derail these proceedings. My client is his blood. She's stable. She has a home. You're a temporary guardian with a hero complex. David Chen, Isaiah's guardian, stepped between them, a human shield. Everyone stop. This is about Isaiah. He's 10. He's in a room down the hall with a social worker, scared. Your shouting isn't helping him. He turned to Lena, his expression unreadable. Ms. Evans, why didn't you bring this photo to me before the hearing? Lena's eyes filled. Because Isaiah only showed it to me a few days ago, and he made me promise not to tell. He said it was his secret, his piece of his mom. I only urged him to share it today because I saw how the judge looked at the file, like it was just another piece of paper. I thought if the judge knew there was a real person, a connection. You thought you could manipulate the outcome, the aunt's lawyer finished for her. Down the hall, in a small, beige conference room, Isaiah sat with a crayon, methodically coloring the edge of a legal pad. The social worker, a gentle woman named Maria, watched him. Isaiah, she said softly, that picture of your mom and the judge. Did Ms. Evans tell you to say it was him? Isaiah didn't look up. No, I knew. My mom talked about him sometimes in her stories. She called him the one who got away on a train. She said he was smart, that he was going to be important. He put the crayon down. Is he in trouble because of me? Back in chambers, Orrington pored over the file. The narrative was clinical and crushing. Anya Pierce, cause of death, overdose. Isaiah, age 7, found alone in the apartment. The father, unknown. The uncle, Michael Pierce, last known address invalid. A series of foster homes noted for behavioral challenges and attachment issues. Then 8 months ago, placement with Lena Evans, a single foster parent who worked as a paralegal. Notes described a marked positive change. School attendance regular. Grades improving. The word thriving appeared. Priya cleared her throat. Your Honor, the motion is ready. They're asking not only for your disqualification, but for an investigation into Ms. Evans for witness tampering, and for temporary custody to be immediately granted to the aunt pending a new hearing. Orrington closed the file. The system's inertia was clear. Blood relative versus foster parent. The aunt would likely win eventually. The file showed nothing overtly dangerous about Teresa, just a distant relative now claiming duty. But the file didn't capture the fear in Isaiah's eyes when he looked at her. It didn't capture the way Lena Evans had looked at the boy in the gallery, not with pity, but with a fierce, quiet protection. Call them back in, he said. The courtroom felt electric when they reassembled. The aunt's attorney handed the motion to the clerk. Orrington took it, skimmed the legalese accusing him of bias and Lena of misconduct. He set it aside. Before I rule on this motion, he began, his voice echoing in the silent room, I have a question for the petitioner, Ms. Teresa Pierce. The aunt straightened. The file indicates no contact with Isaiah for over 5 years. No cards, no calls, no support. What changed? Teresa looked at her lawyer, who nodded. I got my life together, Your Honor. I was in a bad place. Now I'm not. I'm his family. He belongs with family. And you, Ms. Evans, Orrington turned his gaze, which was now terrifyingly focused. You are a single woman with a paralegal's income. You've had Isaiah for 8 months. Why do you believe you should become his permanent guardian against the claim of his blood? Lena stood, smoothing her floral blouse. Because Isaiah isn't a claim, Your Honor, he's a boy. He's a boy who, for the first time in years, has a bedtime, who knows what we're having for dinner on Tuesday because we have a routine, who came to me last month after a nightmare and didn't hide it because he's learning it's safe to be scared. Her voice broke, then steadied. I can't give him a dynasty, but I can give him a home, not a placement, a home. The aunt's lawyer jumped up. Objection. This is irrelevant to the motion at hand. The judge's personal connection is a textbook conflict. Arrington ignored him. He looked at Isaiah, who was watching wide-eyed from beside David Chen. Young man, the judge said, his tone shifting, becoming almost gentle. That picture, the one at Coney Island, do you have it with you? Isaiah glanced at David Chen, who nodded. From a small, worn backpack, Isaiah carefully extracted a creased photograph in a plastic sleeve. The bailiff brought it to the bench. Arrington looked down. There they were, frozen in a summer he tried to forget. Anya's smile was exactly as he remembered, a little broken, wholly beautiful. He felt every eye in the room on him. The evidence of his secret was now a court exhibit. He took a deep breath. The legal path was clear, safe, and sterile. Recuse himself, let another judge decide, and let the chips fall where they may. But the human path was a minefield. The motion for disqualification, he said, the words heavy as stones, is denied. A collective gasp swept the room. The aunt's lawyer began shouting about appellate review. Arrington slammed his gavel once, a crack that silenced everything. I am denying the motion not for my own sake, but for the child. This case has been delayed by the system for 3 years. To recuse myself now would add months of further uncertainty. However, my past relationship with the biological mother is a fact. Therefore, I am issuing a corrective order. He turned to the court reporter. This hearing is hereby converted into a full evidentiary hearing on permanent custody. All testimony will be on the record. And I am appointing a special master, a former judge, to sit beside me, review all evidence, and provide a concurrent, independent recommendation to the appellate division. My final ruling will be informed by, but not bound by, that recommendation. It was a staggering hybrid solution, unorthodox, risky. It kept him on the case but built in a check against his bias. The aunt's lawyer was sputtering about due process. Furthermore, Arrington continued, I am issuing a subpoena for Michael Pierce, Isaiah's uncle, my former friend. He has been absent from this process. It's time he was found and accounted for his nephew. The pivot was complete. The hearing was no longer a simple custody dispute. It was a deep dive into a family's wreckage, with a billionaire judge at the center. And the first witness Arrington called to the stand after this explosive ruling was not the aunt or the foster mother, but the court's own child welfare caseworker, to answer one burning question. How had the system lost Isaiah's only other living blood relative for all these years? The caseworker, a man named Ben from Child Protective Services with tired eyes, took the stand and explained that finding Michael Pierce had been a low priority. The file indicated the uncle had a history of incarceration and transient housing, he said flatly. Our focus was on securing a stable placement for the child, not pursuing relatives with documented instability. Under questioning from David Chen, the guardian ad litem, a grimmer picture emerged. Attempts to contact Michael had been 2 form letters sent to outdated addresses, marked return to sender. There had been no follow-up, no phone calls, no real search. Isaiah's last blood link had been administratively erased. Judge Arrington listened, a cold anger settling behind his eyes. The system hadn't just failed Isaiah, it had deemed part of his family not worth the effort. The special master, a retired judge named Patricia Owens with a steely demeanor, made a note. So the threshold for terminating parental rights, she asked, is best interest of the child. But the threshold for locating a willing family member is what? Convenience. The caseworker had no good answer. Next, the Aunt Teresa took the stand. Her story was one of personal redemption, recovering addict, steady job at a big box store, a clean apartment. She wanted to make things right to honor her sister Anya, but under David Chen's gentle cross-examination, cracks appeared. She couldn't name Isaiah's teacher. She misremembered his birthday by a month. When asked about his allergies, she hesitated. "I think peanuts," something like that. Isaiah was deathly allergic to shellfish, a fact Lena Evans had recited automatically in her earlier testimony. Then David Chen asked the question that changed the temperature of the room. "Ms. Pierce, are you currently the subject of an eviction proceeding at the Parkview Terrace apartments?" Teresa froze. Her lawyer objected, but the subpoenaed housing court record was entered into evidence. She was 3 months behind on rent. The stable home was a fiction. The aunt's motivation suddenly looked less like redemption and more like desperation, a drowning woman seeing a child as a financial lifeline, a way to secure state support and forestall homelessness. The gavel came down hard. "The petition for temporary custody by the aunt is revoked, effective immediately," Arrington declared, his voice like iron. Teresa burst into tears, not for Isaiah, but for her crumbling plan. She was escorted from the courtroom. One claimant was gone, but the battle was far from over. Now the focus turned with laser intensity onto Lena Evans. The aunt's lawyer, seeking to salvage something, shifted all his fire onto the foster mother. He subpoenaed her financial records, her employment history, her personal life. He uncovered a dismissed misdemeanor charge from a decade prior, a protest arrest at a pipeline construction site. He highlighted that her paralegal salary, while steady, was modest. He painted a picture of a well-meaning but ultimately unqualified woman playing house with a child who deserved more. Lena endured it all, her answers clear and consistent. Yes, her life was modest. No, she hadn't planned to be a foster parent forever, but Isaiah had changed that. Yes, she had a past, but it was a past that taught her to fight for what she believed was right. She was resilient, but the assault was taking its toll. The idealistic foster mother was being recast, in real time, as a potentially manipulative and in-over-her-head single woman. And then, the lawyer played his trump card. He called to the stand Lena's former supervisor at the law firm where she'd worked 5 years ago. The man testified that Lena had been a competent paralegal, but was often emotionally involved in her cases, lacking professional boundaries. He cited one instance where she'd used firm resources to help a client outside of her assigned duties, a client she'd later befriended. "And would you say," the lawyer asked, "that Ms. Evans has a pattern of inserting herself into situations to fulfill a savior complex?" "Objection," David Chen shouted. "Calls for speculation." "Sustained," Arrington said, but the poison was in the air. The narrative was shifting again. Was Lena Evans a saint, or was she a woman using a vulnerable child to meet her own emotional needs? Through it all, Isaiah sat beside David Chen, growing smaller and quieter. The adults were dissecting his life, his traumas, the people who loved him, turning it all into arguments and evidence. He looked at Judge Arrington, searching the man's face for some sign, some clue. The judge met his gaze, and for a fleeting moment the professional mask slipped, revealing a shared, profound weariness. The special master, Patricia Owens, requested a private conference in chambers with both judges. There, she presented her preliminary findings. The aunt is not a viable option. The system failed to find the uncle. That leaves the foster parent, Ms. Evans, as the only functional choice before this court. However, the questions about her judgment and stability are not trivial. "My concern, Judge Arrington, is that your personal history, your guilt over Anya, may be compelling you to canonize Ms. Evans prematurely, to see her as the solution to your own unresolved past." It was a devastatingly accurate insight. Arrington had no rebuttal. As the hearing stretched into a third day, the outside world crashed in. A reporter from the city's major newspaper, tipped off by court personnel, published a front-page story. Billionaire judge presides over secret son's custody battle. The word son was in quotes, but the damage was done. Cameras crowded the courthouse steps. News vans lined the street. The ethical firestorm Judge Arrington had tried to contain by staying on the case was now a national inferno. The Commission on Judicial Conduct announced a preliminary inquiry. Arrington's peers on the appellate court were suddenly unavailable for comment. His carefully constructed life of respect and power was teetering. In his chambers, his personal attorney advised immediate recusal to salvage his career. "They're not just coming for this ruling, Marcus. They're coming for your robe." Arrington stared at the photograph of Anya on his desk, now a piece of evidence. He thought of Isaiah's question from the social worker's report, "Is he in trouble because of me?" And then the subpoena was served. Michael Pierce was found. He was living in a shelter 2 towns over, working odd jobs. He was brought to the courthouse, a man aged beyond his years by hard living, his eyes holding the same ghost of Anya that Isaiah's did. When Michael Pierce took the stand, the air left the room. He looked at Judge Arrington, and there was no friendship in his gaze, only a long-nursed bitterness. He confirmed the relationship with Anya. He confirmed the photo. Then David Chen asked the question that everyone had feared to voice. "Mr. Pierce, did you ever have reason to believe that Judge Arrington was, or could be, Isaiah's biological father?" The courtroom froze. Lena Evans put a hand over her mouth. The special master leaned forward. Arrington's heart hammered against his ribs. This was the catastrophic possibility that had lurked in the shadows of his mind since he'd seen Isaiah's face. Michael Pierce looked at Isaiah, his nephew, with a profound sadness. Then he looked back at the judge, his old friend. "No," he said, the word clear and final. "The timeline doesn't fit. Anya was with someone else by then, a guy named Ray. He's the father. He skipped town before Isaiah was born." The relief that washed over Arrington was immediately swamped by a deeper shame. He'd been so consumed by the possibility of his own paternity that he'd never truly considered the simpler, sadder truth. Anya had been alone. But Michael wasn't finished. "I couldn't take Isaiah when Anya died," he said, his voice cracking. "I was in no shape. I told the social worker that. I said find him a good home and maybe when I got right, but I never got right, not until lately." He turned his eyes directly to Judge Arrington, and his next words were an accusation decades in the making. "But you, Marcus, you were straight. You were always straight. You had money even back then. You knew Anya was struggling after you left. Did you ever check on her? Even once? Did you ever think about what happened to her?" The question hung in the silence, more damning than any legal ruling. Arrington had no answer. He had built a fortress of success to keep that very question out. Michael Pierce then did the unexpected. He turned to the bench not as a witness to a judge, but as a man to a man. "I can't take him, I'm not ready, but I know who she is." He pointed a calloused finger at Lena Evans. "I've been watching from a distance. She's good to him, he's safe. That's all my sister ever wanted, that's all I want." Then he looked at his nephew. "I'm sorry, Isaiah, I'm so sorry." With that, the last living link to Isaiah's past relinquished his claim, not to the system, but to the woman who had done what none of them could, provide safety. The legal and emotional landscapes had been utterly rearranged. The hearing was no longer about choosing between family. It was about Judge Marcus Arrington finally answering for the past and deciding what future he had the right to shape. The gavel was in his hand, but for the first time, he understood it wasn't a tool of judgment. It was a tool of atonement, and he had one final, impossible decision to make. The silence after Michael Pierce's question was the heaviest sound Judge Marcus Arrington had ever heard. "Did you ever check on her?" The courtroom waited, but Arrington knew the answer wasn't for them. It was for the ghost of Anya, for her brother on the stand, and for the boy watching from the gallery. He looked at Isaiah, saw the expectation there, and knew that whatever he did next would define more than a legal case. It would define the man he had become. He straightened his robes, a gesture that felt both ceremonial and futile. "The court has heard enough," he said, his voice stripped of all judicial pretense. "Ms. Evans, Mr. Pierce, would you both please approach the bench?" Lena, pale but composed, and Michael, wary and tired, stood before him. Arrington spoke quietly so only they and the special master could hear. This child has been failed by almost every adult who was supposed to protect him, by a system that lost his uncle, by a father who vanished, by a mother lost to her struggles, and by me. He met Michael's eyes. You asked if I ever checked on her. No, I did not. I built a new life and left the old one behind, and I have lived with that choice every day. I cannot change that, but I can be accountable for it now. He turned to Lena. You have given Isaiah something the state could not: consistency, safety, unconditional care. The special master and I are in agreement. The petition for permanent guardianship is granted to Lena Evans. A soft cry escaped Lena. She pressed her hands to her face. Isaiah, understanding, jumped from his seat and ran to her, burying his face in her side. Arrington continued, addressing the entire court. However, guardianship is not the end of a family. It is the beginning of a new one. Therefore, I am issuing a companion order. Mr. Michael Pierce is to have court-supervised, progressive visitation with his nephew, with the goal of building a healthy relationship, should both parties desire it. The Department of Child Services will provide reunification support services, funded not by the state, but by a private charitable trust established for that specific purpose. He then looked at his own attorney, who stood at the side of the room. And with respect to the Commission on Judicial Conduct's inquiry, I will be submitting my voluntary recusal from all future family court matters and my resignation from the appellate court bench, effective at the end of this term. My presence on this case, while motivated by a desire for justice, has created an appearance of impropriety that undermines public trust. That is my responsibility to rectify. The gallery erupted in murmurs. A billionaire judge was sacrificing his career on the bench for this case. The special master, Patricia Owens, gave a single, slow nod of respect. But Arrington wasn't finished. He turned back to Lena and Isaiah. Ms. Evans, the law gives you guardianship. It does not give you security. The legal battle may be over, but the practical one is just beginning. He reached into his robe pocket and withdrew a sealed envelope, handing it not to Lena but to David Chen, the guardian ad litem. Mr. Chen, as the court's appointed representative for the child's best interests, I charge you with administering this. It is an irrevocable trust, established in Isaiah Pierce's name. It will cover his health and educational expenses, provide a housing stability fund for his guardian, and ensure financial pressure is never a reason for instability in his life again. You will oversee it independently. Lena was shaking her head. Your Honor, I can't accept. You are not accepting it, Arrington said gently. Isaiah is. It is not a gift. It is a debt repaid to his mother from a man who should have helped her long ago. You will raise him. This will simply help you do so without the fear that haunted her. The gavel fell one final time. The hearing was over. In the weeks that followed, the headlines blared. Billionaire judge steps down after landmark custody ruling. Editorials debated his ethics, but follow-up stories focused on the outcome. A child finally home. Isaiah moved into Lena's home permanently. The walls of his new room, once a guest room, were soon covered with his drawings. Michael Pierce, with the help of the trust-funded support services, began meeting his nephew for bi-weekly lunches at a park. It was awkward at first, but slowly, a tentative bond began to form, a connection to his past that was not painful but present. Judge Arrington, in his final months on the bench, worked with the special master to draft a set of reform proposals for the family court system, focusing on relative search protocols and post-guardianship support. He then quietly left the judiciary. But the story had one final, private chapter. On a Saturday morning in spring, Marcus Arrington stood on the sidewalk outside a modest house in Crestwood. He carried no briefcase, wore no robe. Lena Evans opened the door, and for a moment they just looked at each other. Then she stepped aside. In the backyard, Isaiah was helping his Uncle Michael plant a small tree. He saw Arrington and froze. Arrington approached slowly, crouching down to the boy's level, ignoring the protest in his knees. "Hello, Isaiah." "Hi," the boy studied him, no longer a judge, just a man in a sweater. "Are you in trouble because of me?" Arrington's throat tightened. "No, I'm in better trouble because of you, the kind that makes you do the right thing." Isaiah considered this. "My mom talked about you. She said you were smart. She said you were going to do big things." "I think," Arrington said, his voice rough, "the biggest thing I ever did was listen to you in that courtroom." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, weathered notebook. "I found this when I was cleaning out some old boxes. It's a journal from law school. I wrote about your mom, about how she could see the truth in people before they saw it in themselves. I thought you might like to have it, so you know how she saw the world." Isaiah took the notebook with careful hands, as if it were made of glass. He didn't open it, he just held it. "Thank you." Lena brought out lemonade. Michael Pierce nodded at Arrington from across the yard, a nod that held no forgiveness yet, but perhaps a truce. They sat at a patio table, the four of them, the foster mother, the uncle, the boy, and the former judge, in the dappled sunlight. There were no cameras, no motions, no objections, just the quiet, monumental work of building something new from broken pieces. Marcus Arrington did not become a regular visitor. He understood his role was not to insert himself into Isaiah's family, but to ensure its foundation was solid. He funded a college scholarship in Anya's name at the Community Arts Center, where she had once taken classes. He quietly supported Michael's job training through the trust. He ensured Lena could reduce her paralegal hours to be home more. The surprising detail, the one that never made the news, was discovered by Lena months later. As she helped Isaiah organize his keepsakes, he showed her the law school journal. Tucked into the back pages was not just writing, but a faded, pressed wildflower. And next to it, in Arrington's young handwriting, a line. "Anya says this one is called He-Law. She finds them growing in cracked sidewalks. Says they're proof that good things don't need perfect conditions." It was a small, tender relic of a love that had been real, however flawed. Proof that the judge had, in fact, once seen and cherished the mother Isaiah had lost. Lena closed the journal and held her son close. The past was not a weapon anymore. It was a seed, finally allowed to grow in peace. The custody hearing that began with a shocking confession ended not with a verdict, but with a healing. A billionaire learned that his greatest wealth wasn't on a balance sheet, but in the currency of second chances and repaired connections. A foster mother learned that family is not just who you're born to, but who shows up and stays. And a little boy learned that the truth, no matter how scary, could lead you home. In the end, this story was never really about a custody battle. It was about the silent debts we carry and the unexpected moments when life calls them due. It began with a sentence spoken in a quiet courtroom, "She's not my real mom," and became a chain reaction that toppled a judge's career, exposed the cracks in a system, and ultimately reunited the fragments of a family. Isaiah's truth did more than decide his future. It forced a powerful man to look in a mirror he'd avoided for decades. It validated the quiet, steadfast love of a woman who chose to be a mother when she didn't have to. It proved that our pasts are not prisons, but landscapes we can sometimes return to, not to live in, but to make peace with. We often think of justice as a verdict, a ruling, a final decree, but the deeper justice in this story was restorative. It was a judge trading his bench for a boy's well-being. It was an uncle finding the courage to say, "I'm sorry," instead of "I claim." It was a foster mother receiving not just a child, but the support to keep him safe forever. This is the messy, human work of healing, where no one emerges perfectly, but everyone has the chance to emerge better. So what does this mean for the rest of us, watching from the outside? It's an invitation to consider the hidden connections in our own lives, the people from our past we've wondered about, the small kindnesses we overlooked that might have been someone else's lifeline, the moments we chose to look away, and the rare, courageous moments we chose to lean in and ask, what is really happening here? Isaiah, Lena, Michael, and Judge Arrington remind us that families are not just born, they are built, they are chosen, they are repaired. And sometimes the most fragile bond between a frightened child and a compassionate stranger can become the strongest foundation of all. If this story of truth, consequence, and unexpected redemption resonated with you, we invite you to join our community. Subscribe to our channel for more real-life documentaries that explore the profound moments where ordinary lives intersect with extraordinary courage. Tap the like button if you believe in second chances, and share this video with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to make things right. We would love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever witnessed a moment of unexpected truth that changed everything? What does the idea of chosen family mean to you? Tell us in the comments below. Thank you for watching. Remember, the most powerful sentences are often the simplest ones, spoken not to win an argument but to mend a broken world. See you in the next story.